Hey guys, it's me, Lily here, and I did my presentation of the progression of French costumes and fashion during the Georgian era, and I also constructed a mock-up costume. So I picked a time period that the book mentions for French fashion, and I picked the Georgian era, which is a time period of 1714 to 1830. And our history book mentioned for this time period a book. The title translated into English is The Costume History, and it has 6 volumes that were published between 1876 and 1888. And this book covers everything from historical costumes to furniture and jewelry, weapons, etc., etc. And I found a blog that gives information of what this book says about French costumes and includes some pictures as well. So what you're looking at now is a picture from the book, The Costume History. And I thought it'd be fun just to add this in so you can get another visual of the fashion that was present in France during this time. And one thing I found very useful during this research process was this one article, A Primer on Women's Fashion, gave a definition on common fashion terms that were used in that period and aren't very present now. So I'm going to explain some of those, and throughout the presentation, I'll define some more of the terms. So the first is undress, which simply means casual or informal dress. This is the most comfortable dress, most casual, and definitely the much cheaper in cost than a half dress or full dress. Half dress explains that it's the most difficult concepts to grasp, but it's just any dress halfway between undress and full dress. So now we would classify this as business casual or dressy casual. And the last one is full dress, which was the most formal kind of dress. So full dresses were worn evening gowns for occasions like balls and masquerades and bigger parties. So some more background information. The Georgian era is named Georgian due to the 4 George rulers. And compared to the Victorian era, where gender was more idolized, the Georgian era was more risque with gender roles and also fashion. So cross-dressing became more popular, and plunging necklines became popular. And this one article I found said that men's costumes, they were more flamboyant, including powdered wigs and colored frock coats. And this type of, they define it as loose living, was only for the rich who set the standard for social behavior. And the term ton was used a lot, and it's from the phrase les bon ton, and this was the highest and most respected social class. And the tone fashion included powdered wigs and feather headdresses and the start of the fashion that we know. I did my project on the dress known as the Empire Line dress. And this was the Maria Antoinette fashion, which wasn't that famous until her death. And these gowns were made of thin cotton and very more form-fitting and more risque, more showy of the women's bust. And I always pictured it as a very French fashion and the kind of Juliet look. And I was always under the impression that this was a big deal and that it was more present in a more time span, but it was actually only around for a year, if only that. And that's because a decline in French silk industry in 1804 caused for the French to only use French materials. And that's when the more flamboyant colors and decoration and embroidery and different kind of fabrics were used, and the corsets were back in, and the empire style dress was out. And that's why I did my project on it, because we all know about the huge gowns with the corsets and the men wearing the pants that cut off at the kneecap. and this was a big part of costume history in France. But what I found funny is that another piece of fashion was only around for a short amount of time, and that a decline in materials changed everything and brought back the same sort of fashion but in a different light. So you get to finally see the mock-up of this dress. This is the mock-up of the Empire line dress, and it's representing the first dress in the picture of the slide that you just saw. And so what I was trying to incorporate when I just kind of put this on here was the ruching towards the bottom of the skirt, and also this train in the back, and then of course to the neckline to show that more risque neckline. And one thing too about the dresses is that the fabric seemed to gravitate more towards the bottom and to kind of show off their figure more, which brings in another part of the risque format of it. And also too, another big thing were the waistlines and how high they were. So on the women, the waistlines came more under the bust. And so that's what this is supposed to be showing, is this waistline that's right under the bust. So it kind of pushes up the bust more, and it shows the more risque part of the woman. And so this is what I did my project on, and this is the mock-up of the costume. So we are on the homeward stretch of this presentation, and I just wanted to kind of sum up some of the things that I learned, and also some more of those terms that I said that I would bring in later. I just wanted to give some more fun information, some fun facts, if you will. So one thing when I was doing research was that it kept on mentioning the season, and we were talking about fashion, so my mind was going to, okay, the season as in how much clothing they have on, but actually the season is known when Parliament opened between the late January and early July and had huge parties and balls and masquerades. So I thought that was kind of cool. And also another thing about women's fashion was the hair scaffolding, and I defined it in my own words as work of art hair. It's the huge hair that the women had that they put different things in it, and it was just like really big and over the top. And also some more terms were panner skirts, which were the huge dresses that had the big hoops underneath, and pagoda sleeves. And these were the ones that on top of the skirt was the sleeves that were tight from the shoulder down to the elbow, and they ended up with a little flare, usually with lace. And so some more just progression of fashion in France. By 1810, hemlines became shorter and heavier woven cottons were used. And then by 1820s, the corsets and petticoats were in the high fashion, and the waistlines that I mentioned too in the project, they did this whole rise and fall thing. So with the Empire line dress, it was a very high waistline, and throughout time, it just kind of went up and down, up and down. So it was always never in the same place. And also towards the end of the Georgian era, women's dresses went back to being more conservative and more modest, and men's dress went back to being more simpler and more solid colors. And I know that I did focus a lot on women's history because I felt like drastically it changed the most. And for men's fashion, generally it was kept the same. The only big difference is that cross-dressing was more popular, and that also when the decline in the silk French industry, the flamboyant patterns were used more, and this was for men and women. So more pops of color and more floral prints were used. And then towards the end of the Georgian era, everything just kind of went back to the way it was. But I really enjoyed doing this project and feel like I learned a lot, and glad that I got to make a mock-up, and I hope that you enjoyed it. So thank you for tuning in, and see y'all later. Bye.